Welcome to the PioneerCast. I hope over the course of the next 10 minutes, you're able to pick up some quick insights on how to help you develop your leaders, how to help you forecast and monitor your markets, and how to help you build your business. I'm Dwayne Abels, founder and president of Pioneer IQ. We're in the middle of a podcast series, which we've called 2021, the year of transition. And the whole thought process behind the series is really simple. All of us experienced the craziness, all the disruptions, which we are calling opportunities in 2021. And what we've realized here at Pioneer IQ over the course of the last 8 or 9 months specifically, that many owners, buyers of design and construction services are in this very awkward, unique situation where they are reassessing their markets, reassessing their business plans, and are now putting new plans and priorities in place that are driving their business, their existing facilities, and new ones. What we hope to accomplish through this particular series is to help give you some insights on how to give you some forecast and predicting modeling. Most importantly, we're hoping that this information helps set the tone for you and your team to get out and get in front of your clients. So today's particular series is going to be on office space. Everybody's been talking about the whole concept of the commercial office space. It's getting a lot of media coverage. And to help us through all of these particular topics in terms of markets, I've got our friend and business partner, Keith Prather, here to walk us through it. Keith, thanks for joining.
Hey, glad to be back. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so in our intro, which we did a few weeks ago, you were here in studio. You're now working from your home office. We too, like everyone else, are adjusting to the new flexible workspace and scheduling. And quite frankly, I think it's a little bit unique that we get to do both. Thank God for the technology that makes it happen.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. This way I can kind of, go barefoot and still look good.
Absolutely. Okay, Keith. So you have taken probably more questions than I ever will on commercial office. Where it's at, what it's going to ultimately end up being, how long is that going to take? Are my employees going to want to stay here full time or not? So I'm pretty anxious to get us into episode 2 here, which is all about the commercial office space. So I'd appreciate it. Just take us over from here and help us understand what's happening.
Yeah. So Dwayne, let's start on the next slide with the taking a look at what we have with capacity right now and occupancy rates inside the commercial office space sector. And what we always like to do in everything is we like to go back to actual data, and where we can pull data to kind of tell the story, we'd love to do that. So what we've got, Castle Barometer is really a unique little index, and what they do is they measure card swipes. So literally they can go back and look pre-pandemic, and they can see how many people swipe their cards in office buildings in certain cities, and they can compare that to where we are today. So what you're looking at is a chart from Castle that shows across the 10 top metro areas exactly what those occupancy rates look like today, which was as of sort of the early part of June. So where we're at today is about 29% of downtown areas, office spaces are being occupied. When we look across, and one of the big caveats that you and I talked about off camera was that we've got to think about this in terms of regional impacts, because we do have parts of the economy that are really rebounding a lot faster than others. So here's for instance, if you look at the Dallas, Austin, and Houston markets down in Texas, all of them, back to about 40% of pre-COVID or pre-pandemic levels. But you take a look at some of the West Coast and some of the East Coast, the big, heavy, dense areas, and we still see a little bit slower return to normal. One of the things that is pretty important with all of this is, again, just the regionalization, and that we're coming up on a time, we believe that September 1st, when a lot of kids go back to school, will be that next inflection point when a lot of companies finally say to the families, look, the kids are back, time for all of you to come back to work, at least those companies that intend to do that. But as we'll kind of see in the next slide too, there's a little bit of a sort of a hybrid approach that's going to be taken by many companies. So the whole work from home strategy, we saw that in May that only about 16.6%, or I should say maybe as much as 16.6% of people worked from home because they could. That was down a little bit from April, where we saw that number about 18.3%. At the height of the pandemic, when we got just a little beyond the crisis moment. So we're talking about June, July of last year. That number was about as high as 23%. And so we're down off of that high, coming down 2 to 3 percentage points every single month. But you can see still really elevated from where it used to be. And so the new thinking as we look up over the second half of the year and kind of into 2022, we think that once the dust has settled, once we get beyond the back to school and sort of this next wave of people returning to the office, that across the country, about 10% will maybe telecommute permanently. We think that occupancy rates are going to be in that 85 to 90% range when we get back. But now again, that's really going to be geographical. Okay, some small cities and smaller communities have proven that they're willing to go back into the office a little bit quicker than others. And so you may see some cities where we're back up in the 95 to almost 100% occupancy rates, which means that existing office space in those markets is going to get sopped up. We're going to be back at that point where real new office complex construction can start in some markets. So that's kind of it. One of the reasons why, if you want to step forward to the next slide, one of the reasons why the office space complex is going to be really different moving forward is that we are hearing a lot of companies that are thinking about doing something called hoteling or hot desking. And what that simply means is it's just a hybrid approach to work. And so they're going to ask employees to maybe show up, maybe 2, maybe 3 days a week, but then the rest of the time, they're going to go into flex spaces. These are areas where, a worker can come in, pick up any free space they find in the office, and that becomes their office for the day. A lot of companies, even some of the biggest banks in the world that typically are trendsetters in some of these areas, we're seeing disparate, approaches that they're going to take. Some are saying, I want 100% of my workforce back under our roof, and that's how we're going to, handle 2021 and 2022. Some are saying we're going to keep it hybrid and keep it flexible. Some of you can come back permanently, some of you don't, but we're also going to allow those of you who do come back to have more of a flexible schedule. So the net result of that is that some places, because of their using hybrid approaches, can get by with 60 to 70% of their normal square footage.
Yeah, so we just kind of running with that comment, and I've shared a few of these with you kind of offline, but we've had several different architects specifically and some property management companies reach out with some questions around how that whole concept of hot desking or hoteling is going to affect the long-term design and function of space. And I do think the point that you're making is really interesting. It's a concern that we've had for a lot of design firms and a lot of design build firms, which is trying to get out in front and assessing with their clientele how hot desking and hoteling is going to change what they want out of their space. And you and I've talked several times about the need, which let's say seems to be the greater need for a whole lot more collaboration space and a little bit less space for individual workspace areas. Is that something that you're seeing across other industry sectors as well?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And some of what we're finding too is that executives are really uncertain right now. You're in the business of creating and helping leaders do what they do better, right? And one of the things that they're struggling with is that this is a brand new model, and a lot of them are already feeling really disconnected from their workforces. And so what I'm hearing is, like in manufacturing and transportation and even some of the services sectors, we're hearing some executives say, let's try to get everyone back into this hybrid model. But if I don't feel the connectivity, if I don't feel them come together quicker, then we're going to go back old school. We're going to go back to, in the office full time, and we'll deal with it. So what they're doing in the meantime is, for office space allocation, they're trying some experimentation, but they're not really getting rid of their full square footage yet. They're going to hold off and make that decision maybe by the end of the year, once they get a feel for what a hybrid approach looks like over the second half of 2021. So when the dust settles at the end of the year, we may see less square footage available than we thought, which would then create demand for a new wave of new office construction.
Excellent. So in summary, what I think I heard you say is that most owners, most executives are assessing the overall desire and functionability of how people are coming back into the office, ultimately monitoring over the next 6 months how people are responding productively, non-productively, great culture, good camaraderie or not. And then we'll probably make some sort of an assessment or official decision on how to transition their space more towards the end of this year or next. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, that's right. And in some industries, there's a lot of competition for workers. And so some talent has said, if I don't have a flexible work environment, I'm not going to work for that company anymore. And so you have some of that pressure building right now. So some companies don't have a choice but to at least start out that way in offering that flex schedule or that hybrid work environment. And then once even employees have an opportunity to try it for a while, if the flexibility doesn't seem to be working for them, then we have seen some employees already enjoy the fact that they have the opportunity to go back full time, not full time. Sorry, full time back in the office physically. So I think it's a period of transition for everybody. I think it's a period of experimentation, and I think the rest of the year is going to be us trying to feel out the situation to see what works, what kind of a competitive environment we're in, whether we can force people back into the office, and whether that's the best choice for the company and for the individuals who work for us, or whether we do find this permanent hybrid situation to be the best way to approach it. So what we've got then, one more sector that we'll cover today, just a little bit, is trade shows and conventions, because I know this is important also when we think about commercial construction and then even what it means for available office space. And so got a couple anecdotes, but we've got some folks who do a lot of public speaking in the trade show and convention space, and what they're saying is for the fall, most of the shows are starting to sell out. So people are just chomping at the bit to physically get back on site, to actually participate, mingle, to go through the whole sales process and just learning process. And so you've got trade shows and conventions that are literally running out of space. So the flip side of that is that I know that hotel and convention centers are having a real difficult time finding people. So you've got some hotels at the moment that are running at 50% occupancy because they're having to turn people away. They don't physically have people that can go in and turn a room, clean it and get it ready for the next occupant. And so they're having to scale back on the number of, overnight bookings that they can take. So we're just seeing really a return to what we would call pre-pandemic normals, if not even higher than normal, by Q3 and Q4 of this year. And the only constraints, again, being, what we're seeing with labor. So in conclusion, here's a couple things. We had, as produce these little gauges that help us understand sort of where an industry is today and where it's going. And so we've got commercial office where right now, just because of the situation where we're still below 40% occupancy in almost every major metropolitan market across the country, still red light. We still don't see a tremendous amount of commercial office space being built. And even looking ahead, we still think it's going to be sluggish through the end of the year. That doesn't mean there won't be good pockets of opportunity out there. You're just going to have to hunt harder to go find them. And in competition for that new commercial office space, it's going to be pretty intense. Trade shows and conventions, however, really emerging. When we update this for customers that are buying these market updates, we know that by this fall, this particular gauge probably goes green, and the new thinking about construction and expanding in this sector, probably see the speedometer of the gauge itself, how fast it's growing, really start to crank up there. Hotels, same thing. And then we also threw in here, this will be for a future podcast, but we are watching the manufacturing and industrial production sector independently. And there's so much happening in that space, Dwayne, that we really need to save that for another full podcast later. And then there's also the public and private side of transportation and warehousing. And again, enough happening there, just incredible growth opportunities that we probably need to push that off to another podcast. But lots of good opportunity there.
Yes, Keith, thank you. So we're going to hit that really hard in our next episode. So today we wanted to tackle the mass amount of confusion, frankly, in the commercial office space. Our whole objective is to give you a real high level of what we're seeing and some of the key things that we're communicating to our clients. Again, as Keith said, every region and frankly, almost every geographic area within each region is at a different place of recovery. I've spent a lot of time down in Texas. Some of those markets are extreme. They feel extremely back to normal. And then you move into other markets that are literally 30 miles down the road, and they are much less open than a previous one. So it's very much based on what's going on at the local level. And so we again urge you to want to make sure that you're digging into that. Our next episode is going to be on transportation warehousing. This one will be much more of a predictable market. You might say it's a little further along in its recovery. There are some fantastic and big changes happening in both those spaces. And so we're excited to talk you through that. As always, there is more need now than ever before. If there's something we can do for you, please reach out. But until then, I'd encourage you to lead on because they need you.